some of you know me from different jobs that I've had related to Roma issues, but I'm speaking to you today as the director of the Secretariat, which is a new position for me as of the first of the year. But more importantly, the Secretariat has expanded its staff and added some new capacity. So in addition to Adam and Tunde, who's back there, say hello, Tunde, who you know very well and who have really carried on the work of the Secretariat since its beginning, and who have done so extremely well. And I'd like to offer a round of applause, even though we're only halfway through the meeting, to helping organize this one. The Secretariat has also added 2 new staff members. One of them is with us today, Alexandra Boyajeva. And then we have another staff person who's not with us today, Martin Rovid. And these are 2 new research and policy officers. And as that title suggests, they are adding some research and analytical capacity to the Decade Secretariat. My own role as director, I hope that I can bring along some value in my connections to other civil society organizations that work on Roma issues. So I work very closely with the Roma Education Fund. I serve as the vice chair of the board there. I chair the board of the Open Society Institute's Roma programs and also chair the board of the European Roma Rights Center. So these are some resources that I hope that I can bring to the table. And the question that arises in seeing the Secretariat staff expand is why? Why are we doing this as the decade appears to be winding down? Isn't the EU framework going to make all of this irrelevant? And I guess my answer to that question is no. The decade, as we talked about in the last session, continues to be relevant as a vehicle for bringing government and civil society together, for bringing other countries into the Roma inclusion process, and not just countries that are within the EU or that aspire to join the EU. And the decade and the Secretariat can, I think, use our good offices to facilitate the engagement of some of these other countries in the process. Also, the EU framework creates a lot of new work. We've heard a little bit from the government of Croatia and from the government of Hungary about how they tried to harmonize the EU process with the decade process. But I think there's a lot more learning that needs to be done, and lessons that we've learned from the decade that can be applied to make the EU framework more effective. And the Secretariat's job, as I see it, is to help create those linkages and to disseminate the learning of the decade to make the EU framework more effective. And so what you'll see coming out of the Secretariat in coming months is, for example, a database of good practice from the decade, and Alexandra can talk more about that. We can offer assistance to governments in revising their action plans to make them compatible with the EU framework. And we intend to offer assistance to governments and to civil society in the development of monitoring mechanisms for the new national Roma integration strategies. And we look forward to working with you in trying to harmonize the progress reporting, which has taken place under the decade, with the requirements for monitoring and reporting under the EU framework. And Adam can talk a little bit more about that issue right now. So that, in sum, is why we thought it's an appropriate time to add a little more capacity to the Secretariat, and we look forward to working with all of you on these issues and supporting the drive toward meaningful and real inclusion of Roma throughout Europe.